Click here to subscribe our channel and do not forget to press the bell icon to get regular updates of our videos. Hello friends, good afternoon to all of you. So I am back with another video on Sociology Optional subject for UPSC CSE means examination. In this video we are going to cover slums and deprivation in urban areas under industrialization and urbanization in India. So friend, please do these 3 hours. It will really motivate me to continue this awesome course. Share as much as possible so that more and more people will get benefited. Comment and like the video and ask any doubt if you have. And now you can also follow us on FB page, that is facebook.com/Unorthodox Academy. So friend, as you know that we are covering slot 4, that is work, economic life, agriculture industry. In paper 1 we have already finished work and economic life, and paper 2 we have already finished rural and agrarian transformation in India. In this video we are going to cover slums and deprivation in urban areas under industrialization and urbanization in India. So by this video the slot 4 is also going to be finished. So now we see the definition of slum. So basically a slum for the purpose of census has been defined as residential areas where dwellings are unfit for human habitations by reasons of dilapidations, overcrowding, faulty arrangements and design of such buildings, narrowness or faulty arrangement of a street, lack of ventilation, light or sanitation facilities, or any combination of these factors which are detrimental to the safety and health. So now we see the identification of slums in the census. So for the purpose of census, slums has been categorized and defined as the following 3 types. The first type is the notified slums, and all notified slums are the all notified areas in a town or city notified as slum by the state or union territory administrations or local government under any act including a slum act. Then we see the second type, that is the recognized slums, and the recognized slums are the all areas recognized as slum by the state, UT administrations or local government housing and slum boards which may have not been formally notified as slums under any act. And the third type is the identified slums, and identified slums are the compact area of at least 300 populations or about 60 to 70 households of poorly built congested tenements in unhygienic environment, usually with inadequate infrastructure and lacking in proper sanitary and drinking water facilities, are known as the identified slums. So now we see the towns reporting slums in India by the census 2011. So basically out of 4041 statutory towns in the census 2011, slums are reported from 2543 towns, which account 63% of the total statutory towns. So basically slum population accounts for a substantial share of urban population in all types of cities in India, and an estimated 160 million people have moved to the cities in the last 2 decades, and another 230 millions are projected to move there within the next 20 years, and the 17% of urban in India lives in slums. So basically we can say that these slums are the substandard housing, overcrowding, lack of electrification, ventilation, sanitation, road, drinking water facilities, and they are basically the breeding ground for disease, antisocial elements, poverty, juvenile delinquency and the gambling. So then the National Institute of Urban Affairs, New Delhi, has recorded that the emergence of slums is essentially the product of 3 factors. The first factor is the greater potential employment which attract rural people. So that's why rural people migrate to the urban areas because of the greater potential of employment. Then there is incapacity to meet the rising demand of housing. So as you know that in urban areas there is not that much capacity for the housing. That's why the slums are developed under the periphery of the urban areas. And the third one is the urban policy which does not allow the poor to buy the land. India, financial capital Mumbai, which boosts some of the country's most expensive real estate. Approximately 8 to 9 million people currently lives in slums, and over 65 million people live in slums, which is up from 52 million in 2001. But slum populations has grown slower than the average urban populations over the last decade, and the average households living in a slum is no larger than an average urban Indian household with 4.7 family members, and the child sex ratio from 0 to 6 years of an average slum household is 922 girls for every 1000 boys, compared to 905 for urban India. So the literacy rate in slum is now up to 77.7%, but still lags behind the urban average. So both men and women living in slums participate at a higher rate in the workforce than the urban average, even though fewer have employment throughout the year. So for example, if we consider Dharavi, a large Mumbai slums with a population of over 1 million people living on 1.7 square kilometer, has 5,000 businesses and 15,000 single room factories which produce pottery and leather and also recycle a large portions of the waste generated in the city. And the total output of the Dharavi, most of it part of the informal cash economy, was estimated as at US dollar 500 to 650 million in 2010. So now we see the characteristics of the slums. The first characteristic is the poorly designed housing on unauthorized land. Then they have overcrowding and congestions. Then there is lack of public utilities and facilities such as drainage, sanitation, water taps, electric light, health centers, common latrines and public parks and etc. Then high incidence of deviant behavior such as crime, juvenile delinquency, prostitution, drug use, beggary, illegitimacy, illicit distilling of liquor, gambling and other social evils are prevalent there. But it does not mean that all those residing in slums are necessarily associated with such deviant behaviors, and that's why slums are socially and physically provide great opportunity for such deviant behaviors. Though the slum dwellers are functionally integrated to the city life, these areas are looked down upon and considered inferior, and it leads to a reactions of social isolations for the slums pupils, or basically they are detached from the urban areas. And people living in slums are not always pure and marginalized. Looking at the growing cost of urban land, some of the traders and land mafias encroach over the land in the slums and rent it out, and they wait till the land gets authorized, which usually happens just before the elections. Therefore, slums operate as a big source of profit for them, and people living in particular slums largely come from one area and they address each other in primary kinship terms and follow traditional forms of rituals, thus slums evolving mini cultural centers, and slums have a culture of their own which Marshall Clinard has termed as a way of life. Then M.S.A. Rao advocates that slums are not the centers of cultural poverty, rather they are the centers of cultural prosperity, and people living in slums glorify, practice and promote their culture. M.S. Gore considered that slums and urban growth are complementary to each other because for the construction of roads, building, migrant workers come from different pockets of the country and they offer their service at a cheaper rate to the mainstream occupations. He further said that the slums provide emotional comfort to the pupils and therefore slum is the lifeline of urbanity and it is the sweet spot on the beautiful face of urban India. Then Marxist sociologists point out that the urban centers develop out of the sweat and blood of the poor people for which they do not get any benefit. They further consider that the most of the people living in slums are accused of crime, drug peddling and other kinds of criminal activities, and slums are used as a source of cheap labor by the urban upper and middle class, and therefore growth of slum is talking about exploitations between haves and have-nots in the modern society. Then J.S. Gore in his book Sociology of Slums said that the slums are the other cultures that does not carry commonalities with Sanskrit Hindu culture. Therefore, protest movements coming out from the slums is questioning to the unity and integrity of the Indian society. In conclusion, it can be said that slums is not a challenge to the urban planners, rather it is an area of sociological research that takes into considerations the factors like the slums and the social change, function and dysfunction of slums, and the slums and deviance. So basically now you can see a record of Delhi, you can read it. So now we see the observations for experience of other countries. So firstly, slums are a logical response to urbanizations and that the relative lack of opportunity outside of major urban centers in predominantly poor countries. They are facilitated by the right to migrate, so they are a structural phenomena. Secondly, slums became a system of living perpetuated by economics, politics and societal factors. Therefore, it makes sense to see them as a part of the system of a country and also the global system of trade and distributions of wealth. Thirdly, people accept and adopt to their circumstances without external trigger to encourage them to do otherwise. In this sense, slums are the adaptive organism. Fourthly, the slum dwellers can improve slums to large extent if mobilized to do so. Therefore, they can also be developed by any organizational entity through applications of technique of change management. And finally, slum dwellers cannot transform their slum without the support of the environment. around them. So they lack critical human financial resources to make a clean break from the situation. So now we see the strategies for transforming India's slum. The first one is that there should be industrial revolutions and continued development. Then there should be knowledge and freedom advantages. Slum architecture should be improved so that there is no problem of sanitation and etc. Then there should be sustainable continuous dynamic infrastructure provisioning. Then rural revisioning and investment so that people will not migrate and will not increase the urban populations. Then the steps that government will have taken are the first, that Rental Control Act 1948, then Urban Land Ceiling and Regulation Act of 1976, Rajiv Awas Yojana, which according to which they get money to build houses or flats getting built and allocated at cheaper rates, and you should update the government schemes related to the slums. So thank you guys for listening me and watching this video. Thank you.